Hello everybody, Cycle Camp here, and today we're going to talk about something that most of us tactical guys don't talk about very much, and that is chokes and choke tubes and the tools that you use to remove them and install them. So basically, I'm going to talk about four different kinds of chokes. I only have three that I can actually show you, three different styles that I can show you here in my own collection. But I generally run into one of four different styles of choke. The first style of choke is a choke where the choke body is actually threaded on the outside of the barrel. So in this particular case, this is a 410 shotgun, and in this case, the choke body is on the outside of the barrel. So here's the other choke, just to give you a feel. This gun only has two chokes. So this is to give you a feel of what this looks like. And you'll notice this particular choke has a little hole in it, and that hole in there is to catch a spanner wrench, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. But so this is one of the first styles of chokes where you thread the outside of the barrel, and the choke, all of the choking that happens in this gun happens right here inside this choke little assembly here. So that's one of them. A second style, very similar, is like on my Mossberg 5500 Mark II, and in this case the choke goes down inside the gun, but it's visible from the outside. And again, if you look very closely, you can see there is a little hole right here. Again, that hole is to accept a spanner wrench to help allow you to put that on and off. Now, this particular gun has chokes that go inside, like this gun, where you can't see them at all. There are actually, this is a Remington Peerless over and under. This actually has two different chokes inside of it. I keep a modified and a full in here. I used a modified for shooting trap, and the full is in case I go out in the field because this is a fairly short gun. And these are recessed down inside the firearm, and you cannot see them. And to give you an example of what that looks like, here is an example of a choke tube that goes inside the firearm, and you can't actually see it. And basically, you'll see it has a sleeve where it's where the choking happens, and then there's a threaded portion, and then there's these set of notches, almost like a castle, that allow you to use a tool in order to get this in and out of the gun. Now this, I won't go too much farther now. So this goes down inside where you can't actually even see it. So the fourth type of choke, so you've got the exterior, it screws on the outside, you've got the interior but protruding, then you've got the interior totally inside the gun, you can't see it at all. The last type of choke that I don't particularly have is something you saw a lot in the older days, and that was something called a poly choke. And a poly choke went on you actually cut the end of the gun off, and you mounted this poly choke in here. It was a fairly large thing, and it actually had a knurled outside, and you could actually turn it. And when you turned it, you could change the choke of the gun. And sometimes poly chokes are also called variable chokes because they didn't necessarily have specific detents where they stopped on full, extra full, modified, cylinder, that kind of stuff. Okay, since we're talking about that, let's just describe what goes on with a shotgun. So most shotguns, if you have a 12 gauge shotgun, the standard diameter of the barrel is called cylinder. And if you have a choke in there, or if you have a shotgun that doesn't have a choke, a lot of them are in cylinder bore, which means the gun does not taper at all inside, here at the muzzle. And so cylinder bore is exactly the same size as the dimension, the 12 gauge or 20 gauge dimension of the barrel. Now, when you're shooting skeet, for instance, you want a lot of pellets all over the place, and you don't want them all concentrated in one spot. So skeets are actually a little bit wider than the cylinder bore. So obviously, if you have a gun tapped for chokes, the end of the gun is actually, the choke makes up the very end of the gun, so that all the taper happens in the last couple of inches of the gun. So with skeet, so there's skeet 1 and skeet 2, then there's cylinder, Then there's improved cylinder, which is just a little bit tighter than cylinder. Then there's modified, which is kind of like, think of modified like the middle, kind of in the middle. And of course there is extra modified and stuff like that. But generally speaking, there's cylinder, improved cylinder, modified, and full. And the object of the game is, based on the distances you're shooting, what kind of ammunition you're using, like are you shooting slugs or are you shooting buckshot or that kind of thing, and how tight a pattern do you need. So if you're shooting a fairly large bird at a long distance, say for instance a turkey, you might want a turkey choke. Turkeys are actually even tighter than full chokes. So chokes range all the way from skeet, which are very loose, up to turkey chokes, which are very, very tight and really concentrate the pellets. And the object of the game is you're trying to concentrate the pellets in a smaller and smaller circle. That's the whole object of the game with chokes. So, as we said before, all of these guys come with various tools. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to do kind of a show and remove thing. So for instance, with spanners, you get these little dongles. Okay, so here are two examples of two different styles of spanner wrench. Okay, this one's okay. It's good if you're out in the field and you want to drop it in a pocket or something. It works pretty well. But the object of the game is you take this, you stick it inside the little hole, and this one's not made for this gun. And you, in fact, let me use it on the gun it's made for. Well, see, I knew this was going to happen. Excuse me. Okay, so you'd stick this in the hole, you'd wrap it around the outside, and you'd use it just like a regular wrench, your regular spanner wrench, and you would take the gun off. So now you can see the outside threads on the gun. Here's the choke. What is this one? Sometimes they're marked. This is a full. This is a full choke. So in this case, we have a full choke on a 410. I think this is a Johnson, believe it or not, an old Johnson shotgun. So you put them back on. You just screw them on. I've been working all day and I can't get my fingers to work here. Hold on a minute. There we go. And obviously, to put it on, you just approach it from the other side and stick the guy in there. This is made for different calibers. There we go. And tighten it up a little bit. One thing you have to watch out for with spanner wrenches, especially if you get one like this, it has a very long arm on it. You can over torque your choke tubes. You have to be very careful not to over torque your choke tubes. And most people tell you put them in finger tighten and give them like just a quick snug. So there's an example of an exterior choke, and I'm going to set this gun aside now. Okay. And in my collection of junk, the two removers I have for those kinds of chokes are these two. And you'll notice I had to turn this one back around. You see how the curve on this one is more open than the curve on this one? Well, this is for 410s, and this is for 20s and 12s. So based on the diameter of the barrel is going to determine the diameter of the choke tube, and you might need a slightly different one to get in there. So these two guys are the ones that I use for ones with spanners, and I have 2 or 3 guns that have guys with spanners. So in fact, this particular gun doesn't normally use this particular choke. I put this here special for you guys to see it. So I'm going to take it out now. Now the beautiful thing about a choke that is proud of the barrel is, and you probably can't see it, but it actually says here that this is a full choke. And not only does it say full, it's got a pattern of dots to help in case the word full gets rubbed out or whatever. So when you have a choke that is external to the gun, usually they will either put markings, or they'll actually stamp what the choke value is of the particular choke that you're using. If you're really lucky, so here's a Carlson, and by the way, I love Carlson chokes. These things work great. These are aftermarket chokes that I use in a lot of my guns. So here's a Carlson, and you'll see it's got that little castle doodad on the top that allows you to put it in. And most chokes that go inside the gun have some kind of a notch system that allows you to get them out of the gun pretty easily. So what you want to do, again with these, you stick them in, you put them in finger tight, and then you use another tool to get them inside the gun. Another interesting thing about the Carlson tubes, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a pattern here of cuts right here. And these 3 cuts, I don't know if I can, let me try to focus in on that a little better. My guy here is my camera is not very, he doesn't autofocus, so if you don't do it yourself, you're out of luck. Okay. So right here, there's a pattern of 3 dots. And those 3 dots tell you what choke this happens to be. Of course, when you have that, you have to have this wonderful piece of paper that tells you that 3 dots is a modified choke. So that's something you either have to remember it or you have to bring this stupid piece of paper with you. Basically, these go in, you slide them in. These are almost always threaded near the top. So you just stick them in. Oh, wait a minute, I put the wrong one in there, sorry. Duh. I had that one out to show you the dots, and the actual choke is over here. The actual one that I use is over here. That was a 20 gauge choke, which is sliding right in. Okay, so you stick it in, and these are usually very finely threaded, so it takes a while to get them in there. And now you use another tool to finish them off. Well, boy, I'll tell you what, the tools you use for internal chokes they drive you nuts. So here's an example of a really cool one. This is one I really like. There are 4 notches around the outside of this tool. There's a centering plug that allows you to get it inside very well. And then on the choke that we just saw, like one of these guys, this is for a 12 gauge. This allows you to go in here, find it, and just put it in very quickly and easily, put a choke in or out. The disadvantage of these is they're clunky. You don't want to carry one of these around in the field, and not only are they bore specific, where you have to have a 12 gauge for a 12 gauge, but the width of these cuts is not standardized across all choke makers. So you end up having, guys with slightly smaller cuts and slightly larger cuts. They drive you wacky. Okay, so that's an example of one tool that you can use for a straight interior choke. So let's take a look. The last gun on the table is a Remington Peerless. The Remington Peerless, you can see it has chokes in it already, and you can see the cuts that you use to get them in and out. So I'm going to use this. I'm not going to take them in and out, but I'm going to use this as an example to show you some of the other tools. So sometimes when you buy chokes, first of all, when I get chokes, I use these little Remington boxes, and I mark them with silver indelible marker. And these things are great because they give you a place to put your chokes. And I'm anal, so I put them in order and line them up in order from hardest, most open to most restrictive. But these things are great, and they even have a clip where you could clip them on your belt if you thought you might have to change them. It's very rare. For me personally, I think it's very rare to change chokes in the field, but if you wanted to, you could use one of these. I love these things, and I use them for all of my guns. I mean, I've got just depending on which guns I have, I bought a whole bunch of these and so when you buy the chokes, if you get them all with the gun, they'll probably include a choke wrench. And the choke wrenches are all kind of different. So here's an example of a little kit that I got from Winchester for my Winchester Ranger. You'll notice these are the ones that stick proud of the firearm, and they give you another one of those nice little long spanner wrenches. It's pretty nice. This is another example of a wrench used for an internal choke tube. I call this a speed one because it's kind of like a guitar speed winder. The thing is really quick, and it works really well. But you do have to use, in fact, this one's even marked right on it that it's a 12 gauge. So that's pretty cool. So that's another example of one of them. Here's another example. I don't know how that came out of there. Here's another example of a kit. Here's a single choke that I bought for one of my guns, and here's the little tool they gave you to put it in with. And you'll notice this one's cut like a circle. Now, I really don't like these, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. But that's another example of a choke installation and removal tool. Okay. Let me see what else we got. Here's something I bought the other day. I bought a new Mossberg 500 because I didn't have one, and I got a good deal because it came with both barrels. It came with the 16.5-inch barrel and the 28-inch barrel as part of the package. So I thought it was pretty good. And so these guys have a tool as well. And this one is they send you this Mossberg. They call it a utility mag remover. And I assume that one side looks like one side is 20 gauge and the other side is 12 gauge. You know, based on which teeth you use. And I like these better because these make a more firm engagement with the actual cuts that are inside. So these are made to go inside the barrel, and this stops it. That's the other thing, you can't put them in too far, which is nice. And then these go right inside those cuts and turn them. Now these are easy to use when the thing is inside the gun, but it's showing you from the outside. It's a little tougher because you don't have the barrel of the gun itself, you know, centering that up for you. But basically, you stick it in the gun and you use it. It's like a wrench, but the nice thing about these is they're small, they're easy to carry, and they allow you to use both sides of your fingers. You know, you can turn them almost like a can opener. You know, a fly on a can opener. So that's pretty cool. A spin off of that would be this set of wrenches that I picked up, and in this one they give you, it's basically the same thing, right? 4, 10, 20, and 12. This one is made for much thicker choke tubes with much thicker cuts in them. You can really see the difference. One of them is very thin and the other one is much thicker. So obviously with the guys that this will fit, I can't use this one on because it's too thick. But again, I think these are Carlsons. These are either Carlsons or Benelli's. And these work really well. I really like them. So you've got all kinds of just really weird stuff. Lastly, I'm going to show you the one that I use the most often, and that's this little stupid tool. I have no idea who produced it. I've had it so long that I've rubbed most of the name off of it, but it's like a jackknife. And this one goes everywhere from a 410 up to a 10 gauge. It's got notches for all of them. It has a medium width blade. It's a little tough to tell because it actually has a screwdriver tip on the top that you can use for doing windage and elevation on a scope, which is kind of nice. So if you've got a scope and you need something to adjust your scope in the field, you've got it. But I find this to be a great little tool, and the nice thing about it is you can turn it like this and go real fast, or you can turn it to the side, and that gives you leverage on them. You do have to be careful with something like this, again, that you don't over torque your chokes. But those are all the different kinds of choke systems and tools that I happen to have hanging around. I will talk about one more choke system, a choke tool that I have around, and that's the Field Expedient choke tool if you're in the field, and it's called a quarter. And if you were in the field and you absolutely had to get one of these out, you can use a quarter to try to take these out, assuming that the thing is that the notches are not too wide. The difficulty with this, obviously, is that it's very difficult. If they're in tight, you're never going to get them out with this. The other bad thing about this is, because it's a round surface, it does not fully engage those square notches. It only touches the square notches right on the edges of the tips. So it's a very poor excuse for a removal tool. So if you put this in here, you can see that round, well, maybe you can see, maybe you can't, but that round edge does not fully engage these cuts. You know, it gets them near the top fine, but towards the bottom, it's not even touching them. So it's very easy to, if you have a tube that's in kind of hard, it's very easy to strip the edges of these cuts using a quarter. But if a quarter is all you got, a quarter is what you use. So that was basically all I wanted to show you today. This came up because we were on a chat the other day and somehow we got talking about chokes. And I said, oh, I ought to do a video on choke tubes and removal tools because I have so many of them. And I wanted to show everybody my favorite in the field tool, which is this little knife-like job, this little pocket knife-like job. Again, this one does 10s all the way down to 410s, and also has a windage and elevation. It also has a windage and elevation little screwdriver on the end, this is just about the perfect size for a scope turret if you're using scopes with closed turrets. And what I do a lot of times is I'll actually take a dime and I'll actually close it inside one of the turrets, and that way I've always got something to open them. But this tool is a great little tool. Well, I hope that this was educational for you and you learned a little bit about chokes, what they're for, the couple, 2, 3 different styles, and the different tools that you can use to get them in and out. So thanks a lot for watching. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to go to Gun Channels and say hi to everybody at Gun Channels, and get in with some people that really enjoy the shooting sports, all different facets of the shooting sports. And thanks a lot for watching. Bye-bye.